Welcome to another episode of the Adventures in Advising podcast. On today's episode, we have a returning guest host, and that is Gavin Farber from the College of New Jersey. Gavin last guest hosted episode 107 of the podcast titled Embracing 10 Years or More in Academic Advising, Celebrating Mid-Career Resilience and Growth. Gavin, welcome back and take it away.
Thanks, Matt. I'm so excited to be back guest hosting Adventures in Advising. Today's topic is going to be sustainability in higher education and advising. And we have an amazing group of folks coming on who have worked in the advising realm, possibly gone into an adjacent career, or found other professional areas in advising to go into. A lot of the conversation today has been inspired by some of the most recent publications that have come out in the higher ed world. Most recently, The Next Act, Realigning Your Mindset, Purpose, and Career Through NASPA, which was co-written by Dr. Jason Pina of NYU and Dr. Amy Heck from Florida State University. This is a great student affairs-driven book that gave different adjacent career roles. But obviously from the advising world, two of the books that I really pull from are from the 2023 Academic Advising Administration book and the 2022 third edition of the Comprehensive Advisor Training and Development book. And I'm so happy to have both Jessica Staten and Dr. Rebecca Hapes come on today. Come on in, ladies. Let's have a chat.
Hey, Gavin.
Hello, friends.
Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. I kind of wanted to first kind of jump into asking a little bit of both your background, what role you currently have, and also a little bit about what inspired your higher ed career in general. And we'll start with Rebecca, and then we'll go Jess, and then we'll go back and forth a little bit.
Sounds great. So my current role, I'll start where I am, and then I'll jump backwards just to give you an idea of where I'm headed. I am currently the Associate Registrar at Texas A&M University, and I've been in this particular role a little over 3 years. And so my responsibilities here in the office involve FERPA compliance, education, a lot of training and development with the advising staff on campus and other individuals who utilize technology that functions from the registrar standpoint. So I get to do a lot of training coordination and facilitating. But I also lead a team of folks who work on our websites and communication. And so, Gavin, you mentioned advisor adjacent roles. This is definitely one of those advisor adjacent roles. And I will say it was quite an identity shift, right, to take a role that wasn't advising. And so jumping backwards a little bit, my very first higher ed position as a full-time employee was in the Office of Admissions. And I opened up a new center on our campus working with prospective students. And it was sort of a one-stop shop, if you will, of exploring what going to college meant for these individuals, right? It was, what does the academics look like? What does the campus environment look like? How can I fit in? How can I belong? What can I get involved in? How can I help to pay for it? And so we did a lot of work in that space, just trying to make sure people's questions got answered. So at that point in time, my role was very much a jack of all trades as it related to my particular institution. After about 3 years of that, I really wanted the relationships with the students. I loved getting to meet the students and their families. And then in a few months, they had moved on. And so what I realized I really, really wanted, and didn't know that I wanted because I hadn't had the opportunity to experience it, but I really wanted the relationships. And so at that time, I moved into an advising role. And it was exactly what I realized that I wanted out of my profession at that time, right? I was really able to delve into relationships with students, meet them where they were, help them to grow and advance personally, professionally, and navigate the hierarchy that is higher ed, right? And sometimes some folks need a little more help navigating that process than others, but it was a joyful career for me for nearly 20 years. And then I realized, right, as many of us do, my identity was wrapped up in my title and in my role. which is a really scary place to be. And I don't actually recommend having your identity tied up in something that can be removed from you, right? Like that was a big learning journey for me. But what I also realized is at the core of what I am about, I really want to see students succeed. I want to see students be successful. And part of that means helping train and prepare other professionals to support that work. And so when I made that mental shift for me, going to an advisor adjacent role made a lot of sense, especially with the work that I got to do in this particular role. So my advisor adjacent, I don't have as much one-on-one interaction with students, which I miss, right? I miss, but I also recognize that my role now has a much larger reach because I get to work with all of the advisors on campus to make sure that they know how to use the right systems and how to maintain compliance and ultimately how they can be best prepared to serve the students that they work with. So that's sort of a long-winded, that's my journey, but it really does go back to what was my passion, right? Gavin, you sort of mentioned that earlier. My passion, the verbiage surrounding my passion has shifted as I have realized that the student success piece of me is not tied to a particular role that I'm in, but that is what drives the work that I've done. All right, Jess, I'm going to pop it over to you because that was probably more long-winded than you had wanted, Gavin.
I think that's great, Rebecca. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Jessica Staten. I am currently the Director of Academic Advising within the School of Public Health at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. And Rebecca, a lot of what you said resonated with me, especially about having your identity wrapped up in what you do, because I've experienced that as well and had to deal with a loss in that way and had worked, through that process. So Gavin, you asked what, kind of inspired us or how we kind of landed in, higher ed. And for me, it was chance. I was and am a trained dancer, ballet, tap, jazz, musical theater, and I wanted to dance on Broadway. And after undergrad, I was on some, tours and such, and decided at one point that I could no longer live out of a suitcase and I wanted to come home. And that's exactly what I did. And I worked in an advising office as a receptionist and then worked my way up. I remember a supervisor telling me, you've got skills that are better served doing other things, not being our receptionist. And I took offense to it because I didn't realize what she actually meant at the time. Something that Rebecca said that resonated with me was about relationships. I quickly realized as the receptionist in that office, they called me the gatekeeper because I made sure everyone got where they needed to go and made sure that everyone knew the services that the office provided. But one of the things that I realized early on is that I had the ability to persuade people, to convince people to do things that they might not otherwise do. And that's great power. And I had to use that power for good, not for evil. And so I started working with our student employees and also realized that I liked the relationships on that end, the supervisory aspect of it. I always wanted to help students, but I realized that I was better served advocating for people who couldn't advocate for themselves. And then if I'm able to do that for my staff, then my staff are able to advocate for the students. So that's just a little background of my experience in higher ed and academic advising.
First off, Sister Jess, I never knew you were a dancer, one. So I'm learning so much more about you that I never knew about you. So this is fabulous. And Rebecca, I didn't know you were starting in a one-stop shop, which so many people have those experiences with another type of office. They make the tweak, they find the advising world. I often joke with people, like I interned as a sophomore in a career and academic planning center, not realizing 6 years later I'd be an advisor. It just was like the jobs that I was applying for that would call me back for interviews. So it's those really interesting things from our past that always creep up that are part of our present and futures. And along those lines, we talked a little bit about, navigating certain challenges. So in each of your roles currently, how do you navigate challenges that you get from students and staff and faculty and admin and even that red tape season if you work with them? How do you balance it all? Because your roles are so administrative, but yet you've had these multifaceted careers where you've been kind of all over the place in the landscape, I would say. Long-winded question, I know, but we talk all the time, so I figured I'd throw it all out there.
I'll go ahead and jump in and then let Jess follow. It's kind of challenging, right? We know that it's challenging to do that. So that sort of goes without saying, but I hope that the fact that I have a wide variety of experiences that touch and interact with students in a variety of ways helps me relate to folks that I'm working with to try to really nail down what it is that they need to move forward, right? So again, my world is a lot of compliance and process at this point. So many times it's looking at what is the real issue, what's the bottom line issue, because sometimes what we're initially faced with is really just a symptom of a larger issue. Perhaps it's an access issue, perhaps it's the understanding of process, but really trying to dig into what this scenario actually entails in order for me or someone in our office to actually address it so that it's not just putting a Band-Aid on a symptom, but it's actually getting to that lower level need to be addressed.
Oh, we so do address symptoms, don't we, Rebecca? Yeah, I think I would have to say any time I face a challenge, I immediately go to what I anticipate the end result should be or would be, and then I just work backwards. I also like to think that depending on, who it is, if it's a student or one of my staff members, something that I have, a little bit more control on the outcome. I also want to make sure that I do as minimal harm, to those individuals, as possible, especially when we're dealing with students and courses and taking the wrong thing, to graduate. So definitely backward design and trying to control what I can. I also try to wield what little influence I have for administrators above me and even some senior leaders at the campus level. I feel like in 2025, we are still trying to make a case for what advising is, what advisors do, and the critical importance of that work. And so anytime that I can take to share one thing that advising is doing or the importance of the work that we're doing, I try to take that opportunity so that I can educate some folks above me who just still don't really understand what we're doing. But when asked about the challenges that I face, I definitely attack those, through kind of backward design and then controlling what I can.
I think that's really great, Jess. I think another component of that as you were speaking, it sort of made me think, looking at it from a variety of angles and perspectives, I think is crucial, right? I mean, if we can try to understand what the other side of the situation is, I think we're able to respond with a better level of understanding, a better level of empathy. But then also as a higher ed professional ourselves, like not everything may come to us as urgent and on fire, but if we can put some context and perspective around the situations, perhaps it isn't that everything is on fire, right? And so I think many of us, and I know for a long time I would get caught up in that chaos, right? And we know how it works when someone is amped up around you. You have the choice to either rise to that amp or respond maybe in a slightly slower way and try to bring it down and diffuse the situation. So really just from me personally, this is how I try to approach chaos, right? Like the things, Jess, that you mentioned, right, that are out of our control or that we didn't expect to face in a particular day. It's just trying to bring a level of calm to it and to respond to the situation appropriately, not react. So I think those are just, I don't know, life lessons sort of things in terms of anything that could be considered a chaotic situation.
Yeah, that's very true. And we know that our teams, our advisors, Rebecca, your team, they are very aware of what's a crisis and what's not, but trying to help a student discern between, for them, it's like I've got folks on my team who will say, this is easy, we've got this. But to that student, it might actually be the thing that's making them, lose sleep. But we can control that, right? We can help the student understand. So that's really good, a really good reminder.
It's so true. I think the one thing I think we talked to a lot of our students about is in the subject line when they say emergency or urgent. That's like a great first year experience course. We talk about it at orientation. Are you bleeding? Are you in danger? It's an advising emergency. And it's interesting, at my new role, we had a registration problem in November where we had parents calling the president's office thinking that we had done this intentionally to harm them psychologically. No, we just ran out of classes and they added more. But it happens. It's kind of the funk of it all. So I loved hearing both your perspectives on that. And again, the theme of this podcast is about sustainability. So I'm a nerd. So I'm often asking colleagues all across the landscape of higher ed, what do you think about when you think of sustainability in higher ed or sustainability in advising or anything like that, especially in 2025 with it being such a new landscape, I guess, because we've been transformed, I think, post-lockdown a bit. I would love to start with Jessica this time, just to swap it up.
That is a great question, and it kind of feeds into what I'm currently working on. So I'm in a doctoral program. Fingers crossed, I am coming to an end to this monster of a thing. But in this process, the EDD is in leadership through the lens of academic advising in higher education. And through all of my reading and my writing and my work, what I have found is that in order to be sustainable, institutions, not just of higher education, but even corporations, have to be willing and ready to undergo change, not change for the sake of change, but change to better systems that are broken. Rebecca said it perfectly about putting a Band-Aid on a symptom. And instead, what we try to focus on within my unit are changing the things that we have systems in place to manage and let those systems run as they were supposed to run. So if we have a registration system that has all the classes programmed in that a student can take, why not go ahead and make sure all the prerequisites for those classes are programmed in as well so that the student knows all the requirements and the sequence that they can, take those classes, for example. So making those changes that are correcting systemic errors, if I can call it that, I feel like makes myself more sustainable. I'm able to work, longer, harder, faster. My team can direct energy toward other things instead of having to rinse and repeat the same conversations that they don't really need to have with students who are, reading the bulletin or reading the class description. So I would say change is necessary, Gavin, to be sustainable.
I love that, Jess. That's spot on. I sort of am looking at it from two perspectives. So one, we have our, university processes and systems, right? Just like you were referencing. we have a lot of technology that can do so much for us. And so as many things as we can automate that would allow us actual time and space to have the real conversations with the students, right? So that's one thing. Like, does something make sense to automate? Can we put a process in place so that individuals aren't manually doing things that are better served in a more effective and efficient process? And secondly is really at the very micro level, right? Like, what do I have in place for me, for my team, for our office that ensures we're not burning out? Because I've been there, right? It's not fantastic. And I think many of us who worked through COVID, we experienced that on some level, right? So we're a few years away from that. What lessons did we learn at that time that have actually stuck? And what might we need to go back and refresh our memory about in terms of practices that we put in place to ensure we have appropriate boundaries set up, right? And that's my language around it because that's how I see it. I don't think there is such a thing as work-life balance because that implies that my work is just as important as my family and that they are equal. I don't agree with that, right? If anybody's heard me speak or talk to me very much, you probably know that I am passionate about my work. I'm passionate about student success. I'm passionate about equipping others to be the best version of themselves. But the bottom line is, if something were to happen to me, I would be another replacement on a position description at my office. And I'm not quite as easily replaced with my relationships and my family, right? So they can both happen at the same time. It doesn't mean I'm any less passionate about the work that I do. It just means I have it put in its appropriate place, right? I have a career so that I can live my life. I'm not living my life for my career. And again, that's taken many, many years to try to put that in the appropriate perspective. But for me, I look at, I've got kids involved in multiple things. Where do I need to be? Like, do I need to be the biggest cheerleader for my daughters while they're at their track meet? Or do I need to be sitting at my office? Well, right now I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, I'm going to need to be the biggest cheerleader that my kids have, right? Yelling as they, run laps or jump or throw or whatever it is that they're doing. There is a little bit of balance with that, right? Like, you have to recognize what it is that your work requires. So there are certain events my kids are going to have to come second to. So I sort of like the term work-life integration, right? Because at different stages, at different times, those worlds are going to intersect. And so it's making that intersection work for you, for your office, for your family. And that's going to change day to day, season to season, right? That's going to look different. It looks much different to me now that I have teenage kids than it did when I had kids in daycare, right? So I think the recognition that we need to be aware of where we are in our lives and how that intersects with the work that we're doing, and to put those appropriate boundaries in place so that we can continue to do the work that we love and are passionate about for the duration.
Rebecca, I love that. And my team, there are 14 of us, including myself. So I supervise 12 academic advisors and 1 assistant director. This past year, we onboarded 6. So half of our advising team is brand new. And they're all 6 new to academic advising as well. And as we're training on the conceptual, the relational, the informational pieces, of the NACADA core competencies, I'm also trying to train them on the reality of being an academic advisor in the 21st century in a COVID-informed world. Going back to something you said a minute ago about, the emergencies and students, explaining to these new staff members that students will have an emergency at all hours, if you're on your email and you read it and you realize it's not a true emergency, wait until the next day to respond to that email. If it is a real emergency and you see it, act on it. That's one of the beauties of being able to do our jobs from wherever we are. But the other thing that I tell them, and I don't say this to be as harsh as it sounds coming out, but I tell them the university, air quotes, the university is an inanimate object that does not care about you. Now, there are people in positions at this university who care about you, your well-being, your health. And when I say it that way to them, they're like, oh, I get it. I understand what you're trying to convey, to me. I care about my team and I want their well-being, to come first. But I feel like as an advising leader, part of my role is to make sure that we're educating Rebecca, the things that we have been through and we've had to learn on the ground, that we're at least educating these new professionals as they come into these roles.
Absolutely. I frequently try to communicate that I created and fed the monster, right? Like I did it wrong because I was super responsive, responding at all hours. And then that fed an expectation that that's what was supposed to happen. And when I realized that I had created the very thing that was burning me out, I was like, oh, wow, that's horrible. Okay, what do I put in place to do that differently, right? And resetting expectations when boundaries have not been enforced is really, really hard. It's really, really hard because I loved my students. I loved responding. I wanted to make sure that their needs were being met. But Jess, your point is so valid. If we don't talk about, I have no problem saying I messed up, right? Like if we don't talk about our mistakes so other people can learn from them and not take 20 some odd years to get those things figured out. If we don't share those experiences, I think we're doing a disservice to the sustainability of the profession itself. So yeah, that's a great point, Jess.
It's interesting. I still check my old email at my previous institution, and students are still asking questions, even though there's an away message that says, I no longer employed here. Here's the general email. And my former boss there thinks it's hilarious that I still get emails and that I was told, just delete them. And I'm like, well, then that, and then in the back of your mind, you have like odds, you have like, well, that student might not get helped. And then you realize they'll figure it out. Hopefully they walk into that office and get the help they need. But it's interesting, at this new job, we had a staff meeting in January where our interim dean said, if you're going to do work at night, please set your email for the next day to be sent out at 8, 8:05, 8:06, whatever it might be, because we don't want it to look like we're operating after 4:30 or 5 o'clock, which was the first time I ever heard any supervisor in almost 15 years tell me that. So I do think it's alive and well, this conversation of well-being and what are we doing and how are we thinking about it. And, they're trying to get us to do walking groups and having walking meetings or having lunch meetings and even like, let's all play pickleball or something. So the activity is there. Something I'm interested about is as we were going on the well-being conversation, is there something you particularly love doing that helps you relax, engage, de-stress, calm down after a day, and you're just like, I'm shutting it off, shutting my higher ed brain off. I'm going to go to do something else.
Yeah, I've got several things, and I'll openly admit that right now at this particular moment in my life, which is the methodology section and the findings, I don't have a whole lot of bandwidth for these things. But in order to get through this kind of rough patch, I am making a list of all the things that I'm looking forward to doing, hopefully come May or June. I have 2 dogs, and they're my children, my fur babies. And when I get home, sometimes I just want to snuggle with them on the couch. As simple as that is. I also have a partner, and I like to snuggle with him as well. I love to read and shopping. I I like shopping, I like crafting, and there will come a day, hopefully in the not too distant future, when I will be able to read a book for pleasure again.
I'll piggyback off of that because I did get the letters behind my name fairly recently. And so for a very, very long time, Jess, I was in the position you were, and I didn't know reading for fun. I thoroughly enjoyed the content I was learning in my doctoral program, but reading for fun wasn't on my list for a really, really long time. But it's come back. Reading for fun has come back. I set a personal goal for myself to read 52 books a year, right? Like, can I read a book a week? And then last year, my youngest daughter and I raced to see who could read the most books, and she won, like by a landslide. She won. But I try to do stuff with my kids. I don't know that I've got. I don't know my life right now, because of the stage of life that I am. It's running around and being the biggest cheerleader I know how to be for whatever my kids are doing. For myself, I like to walk, jog, have 2 fur babies, because we apparently can't actually be a foster family for puppies because we fall in love and we are a foster fail family, foster fail adoption win, right? So we've got rescues and I try to do crafts. At one point in time, I was somewhat crafty, but I may have perhaps lost that over the years. So it's trying to get that creativity juice flowing again, hang out with friends, lots of coffee. I don't have any, focused hobbies other than being the kiddos cheerleader and trying to read.
I'll share a recent craft that got me back into crafting.
All right.
I'm calling it a craft. So there are these books, they're called sticker books. I think even adult sticker books, and they're sticker by number, essentially, where you have stickers in the back and you have a picture and you have to match the sticker up with the correct place in the photo. The amount of focus that takes drowns out all of the noise, especially, recent noises that have, started to occupy brain space. And just allows me to focus on something. And then when it's finished, it's this, really colorful. I'm working on flowers right now. It's a really colorful photo of flowers. And so now the craft piece comes in, where I'm trying to figure out, what can I do with this page that has the blank back? But can I use it in some kind of craft? So if you like crafting, but maybe minimal thought, I would recommend a sticker book.
I love that. I hadn't heard of that. I've heard of the little dot, the dot crafts. Sure, it has a better name than dot crafts, but that I did try to teach myself how to crochet, and apparently I either can't count or I can't keep the thread even. So, just fun stuff to try, just to use a different part of your brain that doesn't get used in the same way when you're in a doctoral program.
I feel bad. I tried coloring, but I do the app on the iPad, which is bad because you're still looking at the screen. But I have found getting through the rough days of Add Drop, if I do one to do puzzles at night and just click in the number of the color, and I have to pick something pretty, so I pick like a flower or a food object or a teddy bear. I don't know what the app is, but it's what I do now. I didn't think I would be a colorer, even though Rebecca knows I color.
Yes.
I'm a square with a swiggle.
Well, one of my daughters has an app similar to that. So I don't know if it's the same thing, right? But she does that. And I always like a good puzzle, right?
Something else I was thinking about, and again, was not a prepared question, but again, it's how we all kind of met, was, our professional development, what inspired it, how has it kind of transformed with your pivot in your careers? Where were you getting involved in it first, and how has it kind of changed for you?
I don't think that mine has changed so much as the volume of professional development is probably what changed. I mean, since my role is still in frontline academic advising, I still look to NACADA for most things. I'm just at this stage more focused on my immediate needs here in the office with my team and making sure that as we build this program that they have everything, they need. And so I'm still involved in NACADA. I still do, several things there. I'm just not as involved as I was, say, pre-pandemic.
Yeah, I would say I'm definitely still involved with NACADA, but how my involvement has shaped looks a little bit different, right? Because I am, again, I'm going to call it advisor adjacent. I'm not working with students in the same ways that I have in the past. So my roles within NACADA have really looked to shift to how can I support advisors who are doing work similar to how I used to do. And then within the registrar's office, we're involved in ACRO and then the region and state level. So ACRO, SACRO, TACRO, and then my boss and I have presented at ACRO-SEM, which is the Strategic Enrollment Management. So it's expanded a little bit as I learn more about different facets of higher education. I'm definitely a lifelong learner, right? I wear that nerd badge proudly. And so it is very normal for me if I find myself in a space where there are things that I don't feel as confident in my knowledge about, that I will choose to delve into those to try to make sure that I'm exposing myself to additional components of things our office does or things that I feel like I should know or at least be aware of in the space that I'm at. So I just sort of continue to find opportunities so that I can learn more and feel comfortable in the spaces that I'm in.
I think it's really wonderful, the new people we meet as we expand our associations that we join, as we change these roles that we're in. You really find that there are some amazing gems of people in every aspect of this industry, and they're just as passionate as we are in NACADA, but also as we're meeting our colleagues, whether it's ACRO or NACE with the career development, or folks that are doing faculty work now and they're doing more faculty-based things. It's sort of that puzzle piece. Like, we're all a fun puzzle, and our colleagues are part of that quilt, and we're opening that ability to keep on adding to our professional quilts, and it keeps you warm, it keeps you happy, it keeps you fed emotionally and professionally. And because you both give such great advice, what are a couple of the lessons that you both have learned as you've pivoted, changed different roles in the field? Any type of little nuggets of wisdom you could share with any of the listeners who might be considering a change or a tweak in their professional career?
All right, I'll take this one first. One of the nuggets I've already shared, right? Don't let your identity be wrapped up in a title. Understand what it is that makes you tick in terms of your own passion. And as long as you're finding a place where that passion intersects with the work you're doing, then you'll still feel as though you're achieving your purpose. So that's one thing. And again, that was a hard lesson because, like Jess, I had a loss associated with that helped me recognize that was an area that was a little bit out of balance in my life, right? My passion is still being served out, although my role and title look different than they once did. So that's one. And then two, Jess sort of mentioned it, but don't be afraid of change. It is okay to not feel like the expert any longer, right? When you're in a particular role and you have done the same thing for a while, it is natural for you to feel like you've got it. And then when you're in a different space that looks different, that feeling of uncomfortableness is really jarring at times. And so I think we need to lean into that rather than be afraid of it. Because I certainly, when I came into my advisor adjacent role, there was a lot of, we'll call it imposter syndrome, but there was a lot of, I don't know as much about some of these things as I thought I did. And I could have taken that one of two ways, right? I could have run and hid, or I could have just leaned into it, which is what I did, and said, all right, so this is my perception based on this other role that I had. Tell me where my blind spots are, right? Fill in the gaps for me. Where do I need to go so that I can learn a little bit more about this particular area? I frequently say I make mistakes, right? And I have no problem admitting that I make mistakes. And I think that helps because I recognize that I don't know everything. I mean, how scary would it be if I thought I did know everything, right? I recognize that I don't know everything. And then I surround myself with people who are very knowledgeable about the work that they do. And I'm not intimidated by not being the smartest person in a room. Good gosh, that's where I really want to hang out, right? I don't ever want to be the smartest person in a room because I'm in the wrong room, right? I need to be with people who know more, way more than I do, so that I can learn from them. So never be afraid to learn.
Yeah, and I've got to reiterate what Rebecca said. We're both saying this about having your identity wrapped up in the role. I feel like it was inevitable. I feel like it was a lesson that I absolutely needed to learn when I learned it, because what I cannot imagine is being where I am in 2025, not having lived through 2014. That was the year for me. And so the lesson that I learned from that was, first of all, not to put obstacles in my way, because I went from doing a thing that I thought was my thing. I thought I had arrived, right? That was my thing, and it was taken away from me. And I was putting obstacles in the way for other opportunities and didn't even realize it. And so coming to a completely different state at an institution with zero background, into a leadership position, definitely had a little imposter syndrome going on, Rebecca. But a mentor said to me, you were hired to do the job that they needed. You were hired to fill this role because you're the person that they needed. And that's all I needed to hear, to be able to be like, oh, right, I know academic advising. I just don't know the details of the curriculum on this campus. I can learn that, right? So I had to remember what I knew in order to be able to fulfill the role that I was hired. So my lesson is, I said, in essence, I guess, is, don't put obstacles in your way. Just kind of do it. Just kind of go with it.
So as we get to the final bits of this conversation, again, I love how we talk privately, we talk publicly now. I think people really need to know how amazing you both are. Something off the top of my brain, how do you handle, let's just say, a disappointment? How does that happen? How do you overcome it? And how do you move forward? Because I know there's a lot of people out there that have been going through those types of moments and they see it as a negative, but that's just something off the top of my brain right now that I figured I'd ask you both.
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. So disappointments can come in a lot of different packages. Over the years within NACADA, right, I have run for various positions. Sometimes I was successful, sometimes I wasn't. So that could be perceived as a disappointment, right? I wanted something that I didn't necessarily get. But throughout any of those particular circumstances, I tried to switch my mindset from thinking, why didn't I get this? Why not? To, okay, I didn't. So what's next? And so many times I really try to look at things and make sure that my mindset and my brain is geared correctly, right? Because things are going to happen that are going to be out of my control. If there's something that I would like and it doesn't happen, I've got to think from my perspective, that's either for my protection that I wasn't allowed into that space, for my preparation, because maybe there's something I need to learn in the meantime. So, or it's my provision. Like maybe I really shouldn't that's not the right door for me at that time, right? So it's really just reframing how I think about that. And I didn't realize how much I did that until my kids started using some of that language back at me. But there are things we can't control, right? And if we get tied up in the outcome of things we can't control, then I think our brains will spin and put us in a cycle that's not healthy sometimes. So it's really just looking at that perspective. And let's go back to some of the NACADA things. If my goal was to advance the association through my involvement in whatever position I had run for, if I wasn't supposed to assist in that way, where else was I supposed to assist? What else was it that could still help me accomplish that ultimate goal? So it's really just looking at it as a door closed means there's another opportunity for you, perhaps in a space you haven't looked at or considered.
Yeah, I have to echo Rebecca on this one because this is my, kind of mindset. And she's 100% spot on when she says, you have to shift your mindset, because there were times, 2014, for example, when I didn't have, that positive mindset, and I saw it as a door closed and I didn't know if a door, would ever open. I am very much, I think, a multimodal learner, but I resonate with visual images. And so when I see something very linear, like I'm supposed to do A and B and C as a type A OCD person, when it doesn't happen in that sequential order, that is the frustrating part for me. It's not that it's not that I don't think it'll ever happen. It's like, oh, now I have to go back and think about a different way of how to get at that, if I'm supposed to have that, whatever that is. And so I've tried to train myself to think of things not so much in that linear progression now, but as like an on ramp, an off ramp, like the visuals that we see of really congested interstates. My goal's still there. It's that maybe it's going to be 3 years down the road before, I reach that goal. So very much exactly what Rebecca said. For me, it's just about reframing and figuring out, is this something I'm supposed to have? Okay, what am I going to do right now instead? Or how am I going to approach this differently? Just got to regroup and refocus.
Well, what's interesting to me too is these are some of the tricks and tips that we tell students, right? When students encounter disappointments or obstacles or setbacks, this is what we communicate to them. And so I don't remember when the aha moment for me clicked, but I realized I needed to take the same advice that I was giving to other people, right? And I think many times we don't inherently take the same advice that we give to other people, right? The voices in our head, I don't know if anybody else has voices, but mine are not always kind, right? But we wouldn't let anybody else speak to us the way we do to ourselves. And so a lot of that has been mindset shifts with really trying to be mindful about it's all still going back to well-being, right? What am I doing to put myself in the best situation so that I can accomplish the thing that is out there for me to accomplish, right? And I can be my own worst critic, which puts you on a different pathway. So it's really recognizing what are, just to your point, what are our obstacles? What are we imposing as obstacles? And where do we would actually need to go in terms of accomplishing what it is that we're set out to do?
You're both going to laugh when I say this next comment, but it's something I would find. About a year and a half ago, it was September of 23, I was watching British Vogue YouTube, and Naomi Campbell said this quote, and it stays with me. She said, "I know everything has its time, and you can't compete with destiny and what you thought you want when you're younger. It's just not your time to have it." And although she was talking about not getting like a fashion campaign, I was just sharing this with a group of advisors at NYU 2 weeks ago, and it kind of clicked with a lot of them. Like, oh, like the promotion wasn't for me quite yet, or I have to like build my toolkit a little bit more, or something's not here, but I'm not going to give up because there's still more for me to give. And I really appreciate what you just said, Rebecca, about what we tell our students is what we would tell ourselves and our colleagues. And we are living being learners. And sometimes we have those moments of, I wouldn't call it selfishness when you don't get something and you have to have your time to mourn it. But you both just said just beautiful things. I know they're going to help a lot of people out there, because what I love about what our industry looks like now is it's like a shapeshifter. It's shaping. Institutions are investing more in advising. There's more positions coming up in different areas of campuses where they're going to need advising voices who are ready to leave the advising day to day, but they're going to need those minds like your mind, Rebecca, for a registrar's office, or what we're seeing a lot like Jess's past job with training and development in a provost office. So I think out there, and again, I should have called Craig McGill on this, because Craig McGill's research on the professionalization of advising is so important. Maybe we'll have a coffee chat with him next time, because I know he likes coffee. But I want to just get your final thoughts. What are some things we didn't get to cover in the questions that you want to share with the audience, that you want to share with this topic, with this theme, with your expertise and experiences out there, that the masses should know about you, your journey, and where you are right now?
That's a large question. So, in true Jess fashion, I'm going to change it. I'm going to share some things that I think, regardless of what facet of higher education the listeners may be working within, that I think we should focus moving forward. So as I became the director here in the School of Public Health, I've been here working on year 3. One of the immediate things that I realized is that the advising talent that we had on staff had been here for so many years, and the historical knowledge that they possessed would eventually be gone. And so we needed to capture as much historical information as possible to be able to know what existed so we could move forward. And so one of the things that we are all, the whole team, not just myself, we consistently do is we say, is that in Teams? Because we have a folder, a channel, a whatever, so that we can capture all of the information that we need so that we don't have to duplicate efforts in the future. And so with technology moving as quickly as it's moving and positively or negatively impacting the work that we do, I think it's critically important for us to realize that folks who've been doing this work for a really long time are about at the end. They are tired and they deserve a reprieve. And we have to be able to bridge the loss of that knowledge somehow. And so my assistant director says, he named it for me. He says, Jess future-proofs everything. And I do think that he's right to a point. I do it for 2 reasons. One, because I love a good historical document that I can reference, but also because this is my type A personality. I get extremely frustrated when I can't find what I need when I need it. And so I feel like as we're training new staff members, they should have the same reference document. So for me, moving forward, it's, trying to make sure that we have systems in place to kind of support the work that we're doing.
I like that. Like document processes. Doesn't make sense to reinvent the wheel if the wheel's already spinning. I just need to write down how to make the wheel turn. My final thoughts, I'm going to go in a slightly different direction and make it a little bit more on a personal, like, what do you need to do as a listener? I frequently tell my team, and I really do try to encourage them to take time for themselves, right? What does that look like for you? If there's a skill set you are wanting to learn, how are you putting in time in your schedule to learn the thing that's going to help you do whatever it is that you want to do next? So making sure you're giving yourself a little bit of space for that learning. And then just space. time to think, time to be creative, time to do focused work. Does your calendar support the goals that you have? Or is it back-to-back meetings and you're not actually getting a lot done, right? So what kind of intentionality do you need to look at on a personal level so that you are setting yourself up to be the success that you know you can be, right? For me, it was looking at bulk tasking things so that I didn't have mental energy lost when I switched between tasks. That may be a really small thing, but it was pretty critical in my world to make sure I wasn't losing that mental focus and energy regarding my day-to-day work. But also looking at, we work in semester, we work in cycles, right? It's either semester or term, whatever the quarters language is, but what do you need to fill your bucket back up within that time frame? Is it one day off a month, one afternoon? What does self-care need to look like for you so that you can remain the most effective individual in the role that you have? So self-care to remain effective, continued learning to prepare yourself for whatever might happen to be next.
I think that was a beautiful final thought to leave off on, Rebecca. I just want to thank both you and Jessica for coming on today to the Adventures in Advising podcast. I really hope the listeners learn quite a bit about the sustainability of academic advisors, the career field, the adjacent careers they could have, and really the fulfillment of having a long, beautiful career in this field. And I'm so thankful that you both came on today. And I'm going to take it back to Matt Markin to close us out for the day.
Well, thank you all so much for this. I learned a lot. I was taking a lot of notes on all those tips. I'm like, I can probably implement that into my practice. But yeah, Gavin, thank you so much for hosting this episode. I look forward to conversations with y'all hopefully down the road. But Jessica and Rebecca, thank you so much for being on the podcast and being interviewed today.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks so much.